Welcome everybody to another Indie Dev Showcase here on the Game Wisdom channel. Every Wednesday night we play nothing but indie games, and these videos are the recaps of them. If you submit a game for a future one, please get in touch. For our first game, this is Obey Me. This is an asymmetrical kind of beat-em-up style game. There's no sound, as we were chatting and playing this using remote couch co-op during our play. But the game itself has us controlling this lady as well as her hellhound as we're trying to figure out why the undead and mutants are ravaging this city. And the key hook of this game is the asymmetrical play. The girl is kind of our main character, with the hellhound providing backup and is invulnerable to all damage. How it works is that as you attack enemies, you build up a little charge underneath the health bar, which in turn will allow you to basically trigger that using the dog's fire-based attack. And there are team combinations as well as a light skill tree that unlocks further combos for the girl, as well as more moves and enhancing the moves of the hellhound. And that by itself is a really nice touch, and we do need to see more asymmetrical style co-op games. The problem that Obey Me has is that it doesn't really feel equal in terms of the gameplay. You can play this game single player with the AI handling the dog, and you basically command the dog to do specific attacks by pressing an additional button combo. The problem is that for the secondary player, you're kind of going to be roped around by the main character. As you can see, the camera focuses entirely on the girl, and the dog will kind of get pulled or warped depending upon distance. We did run into a very annoying bug at one point when the dog did not get warped in, and I was forced to fight enemies and not be able to do maximum damage because the dog didn't show up. And this game runs into a very similar problem that something like Forced ran into, in that when you have asymmetrical content and you don't have additional characters, it can lead to massive frustration. The problem comes when the game introduces enemies that are designed around a single character. And what you're seeing right now are these kinds of like smoke or poison cloud enemies. Every time I get close to them, that happens on the screen. And the idea is that my character is supposed to hit them from afar or just avoid them while the dog does the major damage. The problem, though, is that if you're playing with somebody who's having trouble commanding the dog, or the AI just does not want to focus on those enemies, it becomes a pain to fight them, because not only do they cloud the screen, but it also poisons you while you're in that field. And you have to be very mindful of these kinds of options. And the game itself, unfortunately, is also on the repetitive side. Like I said earlier, the skill trees are very simple, and you're going to just be repeating the same attack combos and patterns level to level, room by room, and so on. There are collectible MacGuffins that you can find, but it doesn't, again, really change all that much about playing the game. If you have a friend and you are looking for a relatively solid, kind of beat-em-up experience, this could be a good one to play. But keep in mind about the frustration and, again, kind of the asymmetrical enjoyment of it. But we're moving on now to Neversong. This is the latest game from the developer Thomas Brush, whose previous game was Pinstripe, and his style could very well be described as Tim Burton-esque in terms of his games. And while they all have a very childlike or dreamlike atmosphere, there are usually some very dark and unsettling undercurrents to them, and Neversong is no exception. Our story is that we awaken after falling into a coma to find that our best friend has been kidnapped, all the parents of this town have been kidnapped, and we have kind of a children of the corn, children have taken over scenario. And Our mission is to uncover what's happened to the missing parents, save our friend, and of course explore and find all manner of weird stuff along the way. So, Neversong itself is more of an adventure platformer type of game. You have each area to explore that's made up of various puzzles that you'll have to solve by either finding items and upgrades, or just beating stuff up with your baseball bat. You'll unlock new songs, which are then used to progress through the game, unlock the next area, and you repeat until you get to the end. Now, in terms of difficulty or complexity of Neversong, I would say this is on the moderate side. Some of the puzzles can get a little twisty, but this is not going to kind of tax your brain the same way as some of the other games we played will. And for the most part, I did enjoy Neversong. And I'm showing footage of kind of the beginning of the game, or the early chapters, because again, this is a puzzle-based game and we'll be spoiling things regardless. I love the look of the game. I was a huge fan of Pinstripe as well. And like I said, while this game has that charming look to it, it does get very disturbing as you play through it. With that said, my main problem with the game is that some of the puzzles make use of realistic physics or realistic motion, such as having the character be propelled upward here, trying to hit an object and have it kind of land next to something, and a few other examples that show up later. And these puzzles kind of become a little bit janky because of that. Because if you don't hit the object exactly right or move exactly in a certain position, you're not going to get what you need to do. And even if you know the solution, I was still stuck on a puzzle for way longer than I should be, just because I couldn't angle the shot right, or if I hit it, and then the object kind of like rolled or bounced away from what I needed it to be. And while they don't come up too often, there are enough there that it does get a little bit frustrating to play. From a length point of view, this is on the shorter side. I think I beat this in about 2.5 to 3 hours of play, not unlocking everything. But I did end up enjoying Neversong. If you are a fan of Pinstripe, or again, these kinds of, looks like it's for a child but not really kind of games, definitely give Neversong a check. And with that, let's move on to our next game. This is that comma is very important, Dracula Genesis. This is a isometric roguelike shooter. It is currently in early access, and the footage that you are seeing is taken from that play, so it may not represent the current version of it. But this is a very interesting game whose probably like the big thing that immediately catches your eye is the aesthetic. The general look of it reminds me a lot of the Bitmap Brothers, with of course the Chaos engine. And the game itself, story-wise, has us fighting against essentially Dracula, who is now an immortal Lovecraftian god of some kind, who is destroying dimensions and trying to take over all reality. And you play as the last remaining heroes who can chase him and try and stop him. So, the general playthrough of the game is each world is set on these series of islands, with the world itself being procedurally generated. It appears to be handmade islands that are then stitched together. At the end of each island is a boss fight, and you'll need to unlock a key or find it in order to move on to the next world. And once you've beaten an entire playthrough, the game unlocks additional dimensions that raises the difficulty, making enemies more dangerous, lowering your capabilities, etc. Now, a very big part about Dracula here is the persistent elements, as developers have gone, or definitely taking notes from The Binding of Isaac. And how the game works is that as you play through it, there are multitudes of unlocks, from new weapons, new passives, Even new gameplay systems such as magic and sub-weapons are locked to the persistent element. You also have a leveling system that further unlocks new features, enemies, modifiers, events, you name it. And this definitely goes, I think, even above and beyond what the Binding of Isaac did. Although I don't know how we would rate them side by side at this point. And that is one of the more polarizing elements of this game. That playing it in its most basic form, you really don't get any sense of the experience of Dracula Genesis. With the Binding of Isaac, playing it early before you start unlocking more items and the various biomes and endings, you still get a fairly complete or well-represented version of the game. In this one, you are locked out of key elements and tactics until the game decides to spawn those rewards or you level up enough for it. And I don't know if that is going to help or hurt this game. Another point is that the general moment-to-moment gameplay doesn't feel as responsive as it should have. One thing that when I was playing the game is that your main defensive move is to do a jump. And the jump has a cooldown to it. And while it's only about a second or two, you really do feel it when enemies are just charging at you from all directions, shots coming off every which way, and you're just not able to get around it. One of the characters starts off with a melee weapon, and melee seems incredibly risky, as it's hard to get in sometimes and get those attacks. Now, the isometric perspective also could be a factor here, as I had issues with enemies either firing from off screen, or just having a hard time figuring out if my character was actually going to avoid a shot or not. And I think developers are working a little bit more on that on the camera perspective, or just the camera pan with its updates. But with all that said, the issues that I have with the game right now are definitely just tweaking and quality of life features, and that kind of stuff can be fixed or looked at over its early access. And the game definitely has potential there, and we'll have to see if it can capitalize on it when it is finished at some point, I think, in 2020. With that said, we got a few more games to look at in this video, but first, a quick break. And now for a quick shout out to our current Game Wisdom supporters and sponsors. Going forward, all Patreon supporters will get early access to our videos. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, link down below. If you're looking for more wisdom about game design, be sure to check out my latest offering of books, 20 Essential Games to Study, aimed for first-time developers and students looking for some inspiration for their upcoming games, and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers if you're interested in anything regarding 2D and 3D platforming design. They're both available in print, digital, and wherever books are being sold. For our next game, this is one that I'm very excited about. This is Something Ate My Alien. It is currently in early access, and it's another game who may not, this video may not represent the current version of it. But our story is that we control an ocean liner, a space liner, I guess, of aliens who have been hijacked by an evil AI, and they're forced to go down to these procedurally generated planets to mine them out for resources that the AI requests. And the game itself kind of plays like a mixture of SteamWorld Dig with kind of like a puzzle platformer, or it's kind of hard to describe along those lines. Maybe some light roguelike elements to it. So our general loop in this is that we go down to these planets, and the planets appear to be procedurally generated at start. They'll stay the same when you return to them. And you're looking for resources and kind of our special MacGuffins in order to move the story and upgrades forward. There are kind of these set areas where you have to solve these puzzles, and those will typically unlock the major rewards that will either move the story along, cause a boss fight, or something else. And when you return back to your spaceship, the game has an extensive persistence system, as you can see here, that will allow you to unlock new weapons, upgrade the tools you already have, and basically provide a lot more replayability and growth. Now, with that said, the upgrades appear to be largely incremental. Plus 5 damage, 10 points of health. And I don't know if it goes as far as kind of having Metroidvania elements as something like SteamWorld did. Another major point is that the movement tech is kept very basic. You can hover, and that has a limited charge, and you're going to be spending a lot more time shooting enemies. And this is one of those games that if enemies get too close to you, it can be a little hard to target them using the analog stick. With that said, though, I really like the concept of this game, and I've been hoping for somebody to develop more of a roguelike or more replayable version of SteamWorld Dig. And while I don't think Something Ate My Alien is quite there just yet, again, this is an early access run of it, there is a lot of promise here. And the game does feature different difficulty levels that affect how many resources you need to acquire to appease the alien and kind of move on to the next world. If you die, your resources drop in the world Dark Souls style, and you'll have to reclaim them with another character in order to get them back. But I really did enjoy the gameplay here, and definitely looking forward to playing this more as it goes through its early access period. But with that, we have one more game for the night, and that is Someday You'll Return. This is a first-person horror adventure game that unfortunately did not really work for me. We play as Daniel here, who's in search of his missing daughter, and is definitely one of the more insufferable characters, or insufferable horror game protagonists I've seen. With him kind of having going to weird rants by himself, cursing out his, I believe, estranged wife when trying to talk about their child, and doesn't really seem all that likable. But we are stuck in this mountainside here, trying to find our daughter, and to do that, we're going to explore a lot of weird areas, get around some minor puzzles, and of course, craft and watch some very weird cutscenes. Now, the look and aesthetics of the game are on point. There's this kind of haunting or mystique quality to the environment and to what happens in the cutscenes that show up. And the game, again, is going for that it's very strange, weird stuff is happening all around you that could be either scary or mysterious or both. And again, I'm trying to keep the footage light because anything that I show in a game like this would be spoiler related. And the problems I have with the game is that it focuses on more, or some of the more frustrating aspects of this kind of gameplay, where you're going to have to comb around very wide and very similar looking environments looking for that one item that you missed or that one interactable that got away. And the point where I kind of stopped playing occurred, I think, about 30 minutes after what you're seeing here, where I had to construct an antidote to a poison, and I had to find all the necessary parts, except there's no real indication about where they were, and every few seconds, the footage got all hazy and kind of messed up to indicate that the character was poisoned. So, it was just wandering around, not sure where I'm going, while the game was starting to give me a headache from, motion blur and issues like that. And the crafting or general puzzle solving involves you making use of Daniel's all-important, survivor's toolkit that you'll have to make use of to craft or repair various items. And it didn't really feel all that interesting. Again, the puzzles are very much lock and key design, so there's only one solution, and you're going to have to go around and find everything in order to solve it. If you're a fan of games like Outlast or Layers of Fear, again, more passive adventure horror style design, then Someday You'll Return I think will work for you. But if you're like me and hoping this would be more along the lines of a Silent Hill experience, where the weirdness is only matched by you having to fight these crazy things, then I don't think this game is going to work for you. And yes, the game will feature jump scares and some very tense moments. It still falls on those lines of a jump scare experience. So keep that in mind if you are easily startled or you don't like these games to begin with. With that said, that's going to do it for this video. So I'd like to thank developers who submitted keys to check their games out. If you'd like me to look at your game in the future, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And we, once again, do these streams every Wednesday night. And as always, check out our Discord and Patreon link down below. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below, where we hang out and chat game design. And come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it. And tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.